What is going on, guys? Welcome to the video. Here is another DSLR no audio video because I did not check the audio before I started filming, and this really shouldn't happen, and I do have to credit Max Tuning here because I am going to go ahead and get a glue gun and glue my microphone to my camera so it works, even though that should not have to happen, but apparently I cannot get the microphone to work, so I will just take you guys through the little workout we did today. Today I was going to Elevate in Huntington Beach to meet up with Noelle and with Brendan. This is Brendan squatting right here. Brendan is a good friend of mine. We met a couple months back. He lives in the Bay. He moved from the Bay Area, but he now lives in San Diego. And Brendan has a really good, informative YouTube channel. I refer a lot of people to his videos because they're really informative. He's incredibly knowledgeable about the topic of fitness and powerlifting and training and nutrition, and he's awesome. So if you guys are looking for informative YouTube channels, please go check him out. But he wanted to come and hang out and train a little bit. I did do some squats today and they felt pretty good. I didn't want to go too heavy because my wrist is still not 100%. It's probably at 93% or so. So I did some lighter squats. They felt really good. I felt energized, and then I did some glute hamstring accessory work while Brendan and Noelle continued to squat and deadlift for the rest of the workout. But I do want to apologize because we did film half of our little talk that we did together, and the fan was on in the background, and I didn't realize how bad it sounded until I am editing the footage right now. So I do want to apologize. We did turn the fan off for the second half of the footage, which is what the important half is. So please stick around and listen to the first little bit of information here, but the fan will be turned off. I do apologize for all of these little issues, but without further ado, here is an informative video about women dieting tactics, just like the title says. If you guys are interested, please stick around. Well, like I said earlier, this is Brendan. So what Brendan has to share with us today is something that's going to be really helpful to a lot of females out there. So guys, I'm sorry this might not help you, but you should definitely still listen because it can help you get a better understanding of your girlfriend or wife who's trying to diet and can't do the same exact things as you can do. We're going to be talking about why women don't lose fat as easily as men do, and then what you can do to combat that. I feel like a lot of people either think they have to do a starvation diet for a really short period of time, or they just take like a lackadaisical approach and they're not actually doing enough. So we're going to talk about exactly how to go about doing it, but Brendan's going to be doing that.
Yeah, so I guess I'll kind of take it away. First, we're going to cover like the reasons why why women in particular just have a hard time losing fat, and it really is kind of like vastly different from men. And we just kind of have a list of every reason why, but we're just going to touch on it, and she's really a good example of someone who is very, we will say, female in their hormonal levels. Yes. And how they diet and how they experience all that.
And you guys have seen that, obviously, like watching my prep go through and seeing how it's a struggle for me to lose fat. Like, I'm essentially the exact example of what we're talking about today.
Yeah, so this is a good way to do this. So first and main reason, this one I wanted to put up top because it's, I think, very important to understand, is in comparison from women to men, like total body size vastly affects it. It's not just like how big you are, but also naturally because of your size difference and because you eat less, there's also less of a thermic burn, which is basically like the amount of food you eat and how much it takes your body to process all that food is a lot different. And that all lead down to like your total size of your body, which really already screws you from the start. So I wanted to say this up front. This one isn't much you can do about. There's nothing you can really do about how big you are naturally, but I wanted to just explain that up front. But the things we do want to touch on below that are really the hormonal effects women deal with that men really don't have a hard time dealing with. But just right off the bat, total body size, that's like the main thing. Get into like the main reasons why from a hormonal standpoint. Weekly hormonal changes from your menstrual cycle. This is huge. When women go through their menstrual cycles, that 28-day period, there's tons of fluctuations in their hormone levels. Progesterone, estrogen, they all fluctuate up and down, and this causes a lot of issues. And progesterone alone, that kind of like stores body fat in the thigh area. It causes you to store body fat other ways. I don't really want to get into the science in this video too much behind it, but those weekly hormone changes like do a lot that men don't ever have to deal with. That really causes kind of like a lot of fat storage.
And again, not a whole lot you can do about this particular situation, but just so you guys are actually aware of what could be stopping you from losing body fat and like making it more of a struggle.
Yeah.
It's just like an extra thing, essentially the same thing as the total body size. Like you can't do much about it, but just so you're aware.
Yeah. And so you know what, I want to skip down here and we're going to talk about why your metabolisms adapt quicker, and that's kind of the next thing we should go over is women's metabolisms, they adapt quicker because of those hormonal changes from their menstrual cycle, but also other hormones. like leptin, thyroid, some of these other guys, they're affected quicker in women than in men. And the theory behind this is kind of like survival reasoning. Women, they have to bear children. They have to make sure that child is fed and nourished and survives the pregnancy. And so naturally over years, you guys have evolved, women have evolved to really store fat and like energy, because that's really what fat is at the end of the day, to kind of better survive. But for men, once they're kind of done with their part, they're no longer needed in the picture too much. Then moving on from there, the next reason is really kind of one that's, again, physiological. This doesn't have to do with hormones, but women, when they perform higher levels of activity, they tend to use more intramuscular fat, which is the fat what's inside the muscle. As compared to men, they tend to use a little bit more subcutaneous fat, especially when they're at rest. Like oftentimes after you work out, your body kind of shifts its fat metabolization, which is a fancy way of saying it, kind of shifts to burn more fat. But the problem is women's fat, a lot of it comes from that inner muscle fat, as we're guys, it's coming from underneath the skin, and that skin, underneath the skin fat, that subcutaneous fat, is really what we want to get rid of in order to see, like, you know, the shreds that we want.
And that's why we go through so much more muscle loss, as opposed to guys who don't go through as much muscle loss. You go through more fat loss. Yeah. So we struggle to keep our muscle and retain the muscle throughout like a cutting or dieting phase.
If you want to know more about the science of it, come on my channel, go ahead and ask me, or you can check out bodyrecomposition.com online. That's a really good website for kind of learning more about this. But let's get into why and how you can combat this stuff.
We shut the fan off in the background just so you guys can hear us a little bit more clearly. So we're gonna dive into diet tactics for better fat loss. So what you can actually do about it.
This is like the important part to understand. Excuse if there's any like background noise. We are in an active gym. Sorry about that, guys, but we got to do with what we got to work with. So first one, right off the bat, you've probably seen her do this. Frequent refeeds or longer refeeds. And this is really to combat those hormonal adaptations we see that cause the issues with women losing fat. You know, your guys' hormones, I'm not going to get into the specifics, they'll upregulate and downregulate, meaning, you know, shoot up or shoot down a lot quicker than men. And that's what leads to like hunger problems, irritability, metabolic adaptation, meaning your metabolism slows down, things like that.
Yeah, so in the past, you guys know that I've told you guys this, but I usually do 3 low carb days and 1 low carb day, and I have done in the past 5 or 6 in a row low carb days and like double refeeds, but my body just did not enjoy that. I held on to a lot of fat because my body was just like adapted, and it was really feeling the fact that I was like starving it, and it was holding on to all of the food that I was eating in the refeed days. So having more frequent refeed days works a little bit better for me. It might not work for everybody, but science says that it does help. So
kind of like a general rule of thumb is if you're like a higher responder, if you don't really have too much of a problem losing fat, and why are you watching this video? But if that's you, and I do have, you know, a lot of like the genetically gifted on the stage, like the girls you see at the top of the bikini level and stuff like that, they oftentimes are higher responders, and they don't need frequent refeeds. And same with men. But certain women who naturally, you know, gravitate towards gaining fat and storing it, this is going to help you out tremendously, like hugely. You just won't get adaptation.
Isn't even the worst thing in the world. You can just eat a little bit more frequently.
Exactly. It does mean the diet goes a little bit slower, but think about it as 1 step back, 2 steps forward. That's really what you want to focus on.
Yeah, that's really what it is. Yeah.
Okay, second recommendation would be train with more total volume. You want to explain what I mean by that real quick?
So while he was writing this out, I knew a lot of you guys were going to ask, especially females, do I do higher reps or lower reps or heavier weight or lighter weight? Total volume in general is just sets times reps times weight. It doesn't necessarily have to do with if you're doing heavier weight or lighter weight, but just more overall volume in your training you will respond better to.
Yeah, so women in particularly, they can just handle more volume than men. You can see this in the scientific literature. They've done studies, especially there's a couple of them done not too long ago, where they compared basically like high set protocols from like women compared to men, and the women just responded better and recovered better to it. So naturally you can kind of up your volume as a girl and probably handle it a little bit better, and that's going to help with burning more calories and kind of making the dieting process a little bit easier on you.
Right, so I try to do like, instead of just simply 3 sets of things, I try to do like 4 or 5 of each exercise, and I try to keep exercises to like 5 or 6 different exercises. I make sure I keep in my compound list because that's the #1 easiest way to get more training volume in, because
that's huge. huge.
Yeah.
If you work, 4 or 5 muscle groups at once instead of just 1 or 2, you're gonna see way more caloric burn.
Exactly. So I typically will do like back and buys or shoulders and arms, or I'll do legs and shoulders on the same day. Like if you're just doing one body part a day, it's just gonna make it more difficult for you to get total training volume up.
Moving on from there, diet breaks to rest the metabolism. This is something she's also done. She did it after a car accident. Diet breaks in general, kind of what they do is they don't help with fat loss directly, but they help reset the metabolism. So when you do initiate a diet break, if you do it for about 2 weeks where you return to at least maintenance calories or slightly more, you end up gaining no fats, but maybe some water weight and stuff, but at the same time, then it resets your metabolism. You can start burning more calories. After you diet for a while, you might notice you have to keep decreasing your calories over time to keep seeing progress, and you can only do that so much. So these diet breaks, they really help out with that.
So why don't you explain what a diet break actually is? Like, it's not a break from tracking macros and just eating whatever you want.
Control diet break. So if you are calculating and tracking your macronutrient intake, then you're best to just try to up it as close to your maintenance caloric intake as possible, meaning how many calories you need to just maintain your weight. If you go slightly above it, it's fine. You're not going to put on a huge amount of fat doing that, and it's going to just allow the metabolism to rest. Now, if you don't go at least to maintenance, you're not going to see the same benefits. So you have to really make sure it's close to that maintenance level.
Yeah, so my coach has implemented diet breaks in both of my preps the last 2 years, and we just did like a 7 to 14 day diet break where my calories are at maintenance like we talked about, and it really just helped me mentally reset, physically reset, and once I got back into cutting macros, my body was ready to go. So it just really helps the fat burning hormones kind of like regulate, correct?
Yeah, exactly. So they're really, really useful. I use them all the time, especially with like stubborn fat loss girls. So.
And it might make your diet last a little bit longer because it's, again, taking the 2 steps back and 1 step forward, but you gotta do what you gotta do.
You know what, and on that point, let's actually just kick down to where is it at? Give yourself tons of time to diet. That's one of the points I wanna mention on here. This isn't something you can rush. I think a lot of people see these, bikini athletes and some of them who do well, 10, 12-week preps.
Short-term quick fix.
Yeah, that's not realistic for most of you guys. The general population, especially the females, you guys are going to do better if you give yourself more time. So I've had girls take up to 6 months, some even like a year. And I've had other ones who we can do in 10 weeks. It really just depends. But for the vast majority of you, giving yourself a lot of time. Here's the other reason why too, you don't want to overstress. When people have like this set date that's coming up really soon, it's like they're stressed on that over and over. And then
the cortisol goes up and then the fat loss stops. And it's just, it doesn't work.
Water weight gain, it's just not a good thing. So give yourself tons of time.
Right.
Moving on to the next one, utilize more low intensity cardio. Again, this kind of ties in with the more total volume, but we're talking about cardio now. That's training volume. This is your actual cardio activity that we do aside from the weight training. Utilizing more lower intensity cardio, meaning like steady state walking on an incline treadmill or stair climber at a lower intensity. This is a really good way to like kind of kick up your caloric burn without seeing those negative effects we see with the hormones. So obviously you can only train so much and do so much like high intensity cardio to the point where you will see negative side effects if you keep increasing that. So you can kind of just play it on the other end where you just walk on an incline treadmill for a little bit. It helps increase your caloric burn.
Yeah. So like right now I'm doing some HIIT cardio and some moderate low intensity cardio, and I notice that making sure I'm doing some of the low intensity cardio does help me keep the caloric burn up, but it also helps me recover more.
Exactly.
It doesn't like make me sore, and your body takes a longer time to recover when you're in a caloric deficit as well. So doing things to minimize the recovery time is really, really helpful.
So next one, this ties into what we just said. Pick up activities outside of the gym that are active and making you move. One of them
enjoyable.
And enjoyable.
This has to be fun also.
Yeah, mine is gonna make you sound like such a girl. I'll go to the mall and I'll just walk around the mall, shop, but I end up walking quite a bit, and if you're to track the caloric burn from that's huge. The other one I do is baseball, but just find something outside the gym that keeps you active. Here's why. The main thing when we're dieting, the main adaptation that causes a slow in your metabolic burn is this stuff we call NEAT. That's an acronym for non-exercise activity thermogenesis. That's a really fancy, confusing term for basically you start getting tired and you move less. You'll notice someone who's been dieting for like 6 weeks or 8 weeks, all of a sudden they start getting slower moving. They're sitting there. We might be filming this video if I was dieting. If I was 2 weeks out, I'd be like this, guys, and just kind of chilling, like relax.
Yeah.
And that actually impacts your caloric burn, your energy expenditure daily, huge. Just forcing yourself to get out there and do things that are going to increase your needs is really going to help big time.
Yeah. So like I'll go for hikes, and
yeah,
I'll make sure that like I'm actually walking to places instead of like, if I can walk or drive or bike, or just like move more in general, and just not kind of potato.
Yeah.
Try really hard not to just be a vegetable.
It's about giving yourself time to diet. Oh, this is a good one. A lot of people, we want you to track your daily weight and average it weekly. A lot of people, they'll weigh themselves maybe a couple times a week, once a week, and they try to track based on these like really like broad, infrequent weigh-ins, but that just doesn't work out too well, because especially with women, from all those hormone jumps, any girl who's right before their period, they usually get that water bloat, or right during their period they get it, and that will mess with your weigh-ins. And when you're trying to track your weight for fat loss, which is a good tool, it's not the only tool, but it is one tool to utilize to see if you're losing fat, you really want to make sure you have as much data as possible to see it's going the right direction.
Right.
So if you're weighing yourself out like one time a week, that's just not going to be frequent enough, because you might be super bloated the times you end up weighing in, and it's going to mess with how you're perceiving the fat loss to go.
Weighing in every single day can be a really big stressor if you don't understand the fact that you are going to be fluctuating daily.
Yeah.
So as long as you understand that you are going to be fluctuating daily, you can kind of be aware of that, and then you are able to see the trend, because the trend is really what you're looking for in fat loss. Like he said, as opposed to just day to day, you're not going to see the number go down, 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 down. It's going to be up, down, but like hopefully there's some sort of down regulating.
Yeah, it's kind of like a general trend going down, but you're going to see the ups and downs throughout it. But yeah, weigh yourself every day and then average it out weekly. So take those weigh-ins, add them all up, and divide it by 7. And that's kind of what I usually do with clients, kind of compare one week to the last. You can look at them individual too, but it's really that big picture we're trying to get at. And that's kind of the thing with everything. This one doesn't sound as fun as, more frequent refeeds, or like, more total volume. It's not a very like,
concrete.
Yeah, it's like not very concrete. It's not something you can just do. It's not tangible, but the psychological effects of not getting food focused is huge. Huge. So what I mean by this is a lot of people, they start tracking their macros. Oh my God, I can fit in donuts. Oh my God, I can fit in this. And there's this like psychological effect people get where they're just so focused on trying to always feel as full as possible, always trying to eat the tastiest foods they could possibly fit in their macros. And it does this thing that's actually super negative, where people are just always thinking about food. And you have to realize you're in a time of restriction. There's going to be times you're hungry. There's going to be times you can't eat something very tasty, and you just have to kind of ignore it almost. You don't want to get focused to the point where you're just zoned in on like, oh my God, like I need this donut, I need this. Because that's when you really start to feel the hunger, and you start to notice it a lot more. And then that leads to crash dieting and binges and all sorts of bad things.
Yeah, for sure. I like really notice a difference when I go out and like hang out with people, like doing something like this, and meeting up with Brendan and meeting up with friends, putting yourself outside of your house and outside of like your own kind of head and like your own mental prep state. Putting myself outside of that and doing something different really helps me just not really think about food that often. Like if I'm driving and like talking to people, going out and doing things with other people, and just like reminding yourself like my prep isn't that serious. There's a whole other spectrum of the world going on outside of what I'm doing. That really helps me stay not food focused.
Yeah, exactly. And that kind of ties into some of the other stuff we said, like finding that hobby outside. Really what she's saying, you're not sitting in your house thinking like, oh my God, the fridge is right over there. Like what
prep isn't the only thing that is existing. Even though you have to give 110% to it, it's not the only thing that exists in your whole life. Yeah, like you can't just stop your life just because of prep, and thinking about food is going to make it worse. So
awesome. Well, I think that's about it, guys.
That covers it.
Thank you so much for watching. This is going on your channel, yeah?
This is going on my channel, and make sure you guys subscribe to Brendan's channel, because he puts out a ton of videos like this, and I really, like I said before, I really appreciate the fact that you're so informative and helping people out in the YouTube world and the fitness world. So go subscribe to his channel. His info will be the first thing in the description box.
Awesome. Thanks. See you guys.